Welcome back. The staff of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association works each day to ensure our nation's lawmakers understand the issues that are important to cattle producers. Cattleman to Cattleman reporter Russell Nemetz caught up with one U.S. representative to get his thoughts on some of the issues that are important to cattle producing families.
A lot of important issues are worked on in the House's Natural Resources Committee, more specifically for the U.S. livestock industry, grazing issues, specifically for ranchers who graze our nation's public lands. And with us on the program today is Congressman Rob Bishop from Utah, and he's the chairman of the House Natural Resource Committee. And we could spend all day talking about a lot of these different issues. I've got a few of them I want to cover for sure with you today, Congressman. Let's start with a big one for Western ranchers, and that's sage-grouse.
Well, sage-grouse is one of those issues that we have actually addressed it in the House, and we need to keep addressing it. The biggest problem, this administration is doing some great things in trying to roll back some of the regulations that the other administration just superimposes a one-size-fits-all on everything. The problem is sage-grouse was initiated as a result of a lawsuit, so there was a legal standard for it. And until you statutorily deal with that issue to guarantee state plans can go forward and try and work out, then anybody can sue and have a judge simply overturn everything that the administration is trying to do and that states are trying to do and impose some other judicial decision. That can't be. So every state has a plan that is designed for their state and would work for their state. But they need about 10 years to prove that it will be successful, especially on an issue of a bird that really is not endangered in the first place. We got sage-grouse. We hunt sage-grouse. But you have to have a plan that actually works at how you have their habitat, their breeding areas affected, specifically how you stop fires from burning out all their leks. That's not what the federal plan was, and any court could actually reverse that. That's why we got to do something statutorily.
You know, that kind of plays off of the fact a lot of groups like the Public Lands Council and even the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and others have been calling for meaningful reform for the actual federal Endangered Species Act itself.
Yeah, and once again, that's a difficult path because so much of it is done through the judicial process. But it needs to have reform. What the original intent was has been subverted over the years by a lot of interest groups that make money by suing the federal government, and they enjoy that opportunity. That is frustrating for us. There has to be some kind of reform to the Endangered Species Act because the very nature of the Endangered Species Act right now is simply to set aside land as if that will solve the problem. But nothing is actually going down there to come up with a plan to improve the species and rehabilitate the species. That's what our goal should be. That's not the goal of the Endangered Species Act.
What about the Antiquities Act? I mean, you folks in Utah have seen firsthand what the 1906 Antiquities Act could mean for landowners and ranchers and others in states like Utah. I mean, what about meaningful reform for that too?
Oh, jeez. It's the same thing over and over again. When the bill was passed, it gave legislative power to an executive, which was a dumb idea. However, the original bill has some sideboards on there to make sure that presidents do not abuse that power. And of the 16 presidents who have used the act, 13 did not abuse it. 3 have. Unfortunately, there are 3 of our last 5 presidents who have abused that. So the last administration just went rampant in just ignoring the provisions of the act itself. So we have we have one choice, is to go back there and statutorily change the act, and we do have a wonderful bill in the House that would do that, simply to ensure that people in the area in which these monuments would be designated have the right to have input, and that you would actually go back to the original concepts of the Antiquities Act is to save an antiquity, not just corral as much land as you can and change its definition of what its public purpose should be. So if the presidents would simply not abuse the act and go back to the original letter of the law and follow that, there really wouldn't be a problem. But we've had presidents now who have abused it continuously, and interest groups that now realize instead of going through a legislative process as they ought to, which is laborious and takes time, just go to a president and convince him to just ignore the law and ignore Congress and do it with a proclamation. That's a problem. It's got to stop.
As I mentioned at the top of the segment, I mean, you folks on the House side, more specifically the House Natural Resource Committee, are working on some very important issues for U.S. agriculture, U.S. livestock producers. How frustrating is it as you guys work on big issues like this only to hit the Senate's filibuster roadblock where everything just stalls out over in that chamber?
It is incredibly difficult for us. We repeatedly pass these things in the House. But the filibuster rule in the Senate, which was originally designed to ensure there was debate, is once again being abused, like the Antiquities Act is being abused. So that now any jerk senator can simply threaten a filibuster and they don't even talk about it in the first place. In fact, when we try to negotiate with senators, they won't even broach certain issues because they said we can't break the filibuster logjam. And certain special interest groups realize they can go to a specific senator and say, don't do this. That senator can then just invoke the filibuster right, put a hold on the legislation, and nothing ever happens. Here's the bottom line. As long as the filibuster rule remains in the Senate, nothing's going to take place. And I recognize why people are so frustrated. They said they voted for a change in the last election. They gave the House, the Senate and the presidency to Republicans, and nothing has changed. And I agree, nothing has changed. It's frustrating for us because one jerk senator can actually stop anything from happening just by threatening a filibuster. Not even going down and talking, just the threat of a filibuster stops it, to the point they won't even negotiate on anything where they think there would be a threat to the filibuster. If we're going to make changes, the filibuster rule has to leave. Now, a lot of people will say, well, the filibuster can stop bad things from happening. That's half of the story and true. But if something bad is already in existence, you can never get out of it because of a filibuster. If the Senate was simply voting on a majoritarian basis, as the House has for the last century, you can pass a lot of things with 51 bad votes, but you can also get out of a lot of bad things with 51 votes. So this is the idea of, bad things will be passed, even with good intentions. How can you reform them in the future? And as long as there is a filibuster, there will never be any change. There will never be any reform. All these issues we're talking about, we're just wasting our breath. We can get them done in the House. I can't in the Senate, and only because of the procedural rule known as the filibuster.
Congressman Bishop, thanks for joining us on Cattleman to Cattleman.
I appreciate it, and keep up the good work, because obviously, if without you guys, I waste away into nothing.
Well, we appreciate him in all seriousness. Join us on the program and for sharing your thoughts and, more importantly, your candid common sense that echoes and resonates well out there in farm and ranch country. Kevin, with that, we'll go ahead and send it back to you.